Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Well, today we've got another pistol video for you, and this particular firearm, I've had some requests to talk about the Glock 30 and 45 ACP, and we've covered its slimmer brethren before, the 36 here, but there's actually, I have a lot of history with this firearm. It was actually the very first Glock that I ever owned, and it was my first backup gun that I ever owned, and there's a lot more that goes into that. But a lot of people are questioning, with all the different options you have today, whether something like the Glock 30 really even has a place anymore in the concealed carry market. Well, we're going to try and answer that question and a few other things, and we're going to do that in just a minute. Alright, once again, welcome back. Thanks so much for being here. If this is your first time coming to the channel, or if you've been watching our videos and just haven't had a chance to do so, and you like our content, please consider subscribing. You can locate that subscribe button in the lower right hand corner of your computer screen there, or if you're on a mobile device, you can just scroll down below the video and you can hit the subscribe button that way. It's a very simple thing that helps us out a whole lot, and we really appreciate it. So today we're talking about the Glock 30. Now, as I mentioned, this was the very first Glock that I ever owned. And let me kind of tell you how that happened before we get too far into it. At the time that I bought that firearm, I was actually a new and green person carrying a firearm for the very first time on the streets. And my duty weapon was this, the HK USP 40. And this is actually my actual duty weapon. This is the one that I carried on the street. And before the department upgraded to Glocks, and which was a hard day for me because I really love my HKs. But at the time I was carrying this weapon, you got to remember, this was brand new. This is in the late 90s is when this all began. And being new and green, you know, I thought, well, I'm going to get my backup gun. And you're talking to a lot of other people that don't know a whole lot either, and you know, you end up making selections. And I saw the Glock 30 among the different smaller options they had at the time. Now you have to remember, you know, this was, you know, 22, 23 years ago. And they've made so many different options available since then. But the 30 was one of the smallest guns I could see at the time that was available in the case. That was a Glock. And it seemed like a good option at the time, so I ended up going with this. And we'll talk about some of what I discovered that didn't make it ideal a little bit later. But anyway, we always like to start off with a little comparisons for our size here. So I'll take something you're all familiar with. Obviously, we always talk about the Glock 19. Well, if you take the Glock 19 and you stick it down next to the Glock 30, you could see that with the exception of the grip, these firearms are very, very close to the same size. I mean, they're almost identical. So if you're looking for something really small, obviously this isn't it. Now, compared to the 19, it's a little smaller. And I guess that's kind of what they were going for at the time whenever the, the compact Glocks were coming out in the various forms. Now, when you look at these from the top, you can definitely see how much wider the 30 is compared to the 19. So you have a little bit more grip length on the 19, but you've got that width on the 30. And when you have that in a holster, it makes a difference. If it's an inside the waistband holster, it certainly makes a difference. So you can really feel the thickness of that firearm when you carry it. And I tried a lot of different ways to carry this as a backup gun, and it was just very uncomfortable. Let me make another comparison for you here, and this is the Glock 36. So obviously the single stack version of this, if you look, you can see obviously from this angle everything looks the same, pretty close. You know, where it really makes a difference is when you get them up this way, and you can see the slimness of the 36 compared to the 30. And that's one of the reasons why, to this day, the 36 is one of my favorite carry guns, and as far as Glock goes, I just think it's a really good size. I'm not one of these people that's really big on having to have just crazy amounts of rounds. I'm okay with the capacity on something like the 36. So I think it's a good option. But that gives you a pretty good idea of what you're looking at as far as size. And of course, that's one of your main considerations when you're looking at a carry gun. All right, we're going to talk about the features. And most people watching this video, not everybody, but most people are familiar to some degree with Glocks, especially as many Glock 19 owners as there are out there, and a lot of other popular ones, 43 and 43X, 42, different concealment type handguns. So a lot of stuff about the Glock is going to be repetition, but we're going to go ahead and treat this like we would any other firearm, and we're going to do a top to bottom on the features. Now, the sights, of course, this has the standard Glock little U notch in the rear there and the white dot on the front. This is, I believe, the only Glock that I own that the sights didn't either come upgraded or I didn't upgrade them myself. And the question may come up, well, why not? You look at virtually everything else I have, it's either been upgraded to Trijicon, XDRs, or TrueGlow TFOs. There's something that gives me a little higher quality sight. Well, as I said at the beginning, whenever I picked this gun up originally, it was a very inexperienced person looking for a backup gun. And I found out through experience of carrying this firearm that it was good for that, and it was enjoyable at the range, but it was just never going to be a firearm that I carried on me as a primary, like a concealed carry firearm. And because of that, I never felt the need to upgrade the sights on it, even though I've got thousands and thousands of rounds through this firearm. So that's how we ended up there. And I think that these sights are fine for most shooting conditions. That shoots excellent with these. And you got your normal stuff you'd see on the Glock. You got your rear serrations. And obviously, keep in mind, everybody, this is a 23-year-old firearm. So earlier generations of Glock, look different. And there are some models I still make today that have some of the older designs. So that's what you're seeing here. But most things are obviously still look like a Glock. Your trigger guard and those kinds of things. Your magazine release there. Okay. And, there's the older style texturing. One thing I do like is the grip. It has that finger split. There are a lot of firearms that they've made this little bump between the fingers, and between that and a decent magazine plate on the bottom, this is a really comfortable firearm. You can get a really good grip on this, and when you're shooting it, to me, sort of inadvertently, this is one of the best shooting Glocks that I've ever had my hands on. It's just a really good balance for my hand. The thickness and the way the grip, it's like it was made for my hand. And I guess that's another reason why I liked it so much, is it seemed like it was made for me. So let's get this magazine out, let you see, of course, that we are safe and all that kind of good stuff before we start poking around with anything else here. And, of course, you've got your slide, stop and release there. If you're used to using Glocks in any capacity, of course, you see the lever, the little lever there on this side. There's one on the other side, looks just like it. You move the slide back just very slightly, pull these down, and then the whole thing can go forward for disassembly. Then, of course, you've got your spring and your rod, which can come out. Then you can tip your barrel out, and you can do your cleaning. And then, of course, the whole thing just very simply and easily slides right back together, and you're ready to rock and roll again. Glocks are really easy to do the basic teardown and cleaning, and that's another thing a lot of people like about them. And, of course, you got your standard Glock trigger. And if you've shot a Glock, you know what that means. It's going to be around the same poundage as any other Glock that you pick up, pretty close anyway, and it's going to feel about the same way. Glocks, you have a little bit of take-up, and then when they snap, they are pretty consistent. They've got a good reset, not great, but I think it's good. And really, I've always thought that Glocks had a decent reset anyway among these type of handguns. And the 30 I've always thought had an exceptional one. So, like I say, nothing fancy, no frills, but it has what you need. And of course, I mentioned the sights, they are upgradable, but I've seen no need up to this point. But it's a good capacity, feels good in the hand, it's a well-designed firearm. Alright, well, let's talk about the range. I will say this about the Glock 30. Second to only one firearm, and that is this one, my USP 40. This firearm has more range time than anything that I own. I don't think that any amount of shooting that I can ever do will catch up with all the shooting that I used to do before going on duty. I used to take both of my firearms, my backup and my primary, and I would go to the range a couple of days a week before I went on duty, and I would shoot a couple of hundred rounds. And then I would get there a little early and clean my guns and then get ready to, go do my business. And I did that for years and years and years and years. And so there's just no telling how many rounds I've actually put through this firearm, just practicing. And I've never, in that entire time, I've never changed a single part on this firearm, and I've never had a single failure out of this firearm. And a typical day at the range is going to involve some good old blazer here, and typical 230 grain FMJ. I've also got the Winchester white box. Of course, it's also 230 grain. I've shot tons and tons. I can't tell you how many of these giant bricks have gone through that firearm. It's pretty easy as far as defensive rounds. If you've watched this channel at all or heard me discuss defensive ammo, you'll see this one come up a lot, which is the SIG V Crown. And people have different opinions about their ammo, so, if you don't like SIG ammo, that's fine. But I've had really good luck with the ammo, and that's one reason why I use it a lot. The 200 grain V Crown here, I've never had any problems with that. But my all-time favorite is, of course, the Gold Dot here. 230 grain Gold Dot Spear. Really, really good ammo. Out of everything that I've shot through the gun, this is the most accurate round. And pretty much all of my 45 ACP defensive handguns are going to have this particular round in the magazine when I carry it. So, I was talking about some of the characteristics of the firearm, the width and the grip, and for me, how it's just sort of married to my hand. Well, because of that, this is extremely good shooting platform. Even with your basic sights, this is a firearm that you can step up and start taking shots. And for me, it's an extremely accurate, and it was easy to be accurate with this firearm. I wasn't having to try to feel around and make adjustments for where my point of impact was versus point of aim. It was just a good natural shooting firearm. And I'll often hand this to other people at the range that are newcomers or people who just haven't seen one in a while, let them shoot it too. And it's always the same thing. They're like, man, it's too bad that thing's such a brick because it shoots really well. Well, that's my sentiments exactly. It's a brick, but it shoots really, really well. As I said, before, like all Glocks, it's got a trigger that most people are familiar with. It's got a decent reset, but it's one of the most reliable and, accurate firearms out of anything I've ever owned. So if you want something, whether it's just for range or home defense, or you plan on carrying it, if you're concerned about accuracy and reliability, I've never had a problem with either of those things with the Glock 30. So what's it like to carry the Glock 30 as a concealed carry weapon? Well, I didn't have a whole lot of luck originally. I tried a couple different things, including a good old Uncle Mike's holster, which, once again, save your criticism. This was a very young and inexperienced individual looking for something to carry a gun with. And that just didn't work out. Eventually, this firearm actually ended up carrying it in a under-the-shoulder rig that attached to my vest. This is how this gun carried as a backup for me. for a number of years. It was almost a belly band, but it had a shoulder rig to keep it from sagging and falling, and I kept it on my right side. And it was a great place for it. It's easy for me to get to, and that's where it spent a lot of its time. When I decided to try and carry it as a regular concealed carry firearm, well, really, it was a no-brainer for me, because any Glock that has any weight to it, I always end up going with something, like a crossbreed. I've got tons of these. You can see this one's worn out because this firearm's been in it many, many times. You can see the print. But something like this that has, clips on both sides so that your belt can distribute the weight really good, and of course your body, the leather, will conform to you over time. Something like this is really ideal for this type of firearm. And if you've got a good holster like that, the weight of something like this, just like a 19 or anything else that's going to be a similar total weight, it just kind of disappears. Very comfortable. I've probably carried the Glock 19, the Glock 30, the 23, the 29. I've carried, oh man, there's a lot of guns that are all in that same general size category that I've carried for a long, long time. And with a good holster like that, it kind of just, you forget that you've got it. Of course, you have to be aware that it's back there like anything else, good situational awareness, and, you check it from time to time. But if you have a good belt and a good holster, it's not a problem whatsoever. So overall impressions of the Glock 30 and 45 ACP. Well, once again, I've got a lot of history with this firearm because this was the very first Glock I ever bought. And I bought it not knowing what I was doing at the time. And I bought it without considerations for a lot of things that you really should consider in a backup weapon. At the time that I bought this, of course, I was carrying a HK USP. Obviously, if my USP ran out of ammo, I couldn't use the ammo from this one, or vice versa. If you have a one weapon malfunction, it's really good to have something that will work. And I'd never thought about that, of course. At the time, I was new. But later on, things changed. I did a lot better whenever we upgraded the Glocks, because our service weapon ended up being the Glock 22, so I bought the baby Glock, the 27, to go with it. And so I had that magazine interchangeability and all that kind of stuff going on. But this was still a great backup weapon. I carried it with me faithfully for a very long time, and like I say, it was shot at least 2 times a week at the range along with my service weapon, and it's never let me down. I think that even though it's fat and it's a brick, and if you compare it to a lot of other guns that have the same capacity, you could easily come up with choices that you like better. Just like myself, I ended up liking the Glock 36 a whole lot more because as a single stack, it gives me the power of the cartridge that I want, the 45 ACP cartridge, in a package that's slimmer and lighter, and it just makes a huge difference when I have the firearm on me. But no matter how big and clunky this thing is and how hard it may be to carry for me, it may not be my preferred choice, but I will always admire this firearm because it has been the most reliable and flawless item I've ever owned. And I imagine it's going to continue to do this on down the road. So if you've been considering a Glock 30 for whatever purpose, whether it's a home defense gun, nightstand gun, if you will, just a range gun, or a gun for, going to the woods on your property. If you want something that is proven reliable and is good ergonomics, feels great in the hand, and as a result, it has really good shooting characteristics as well, this is a great choice. It's been around for a long time, and a lot of people may say, well, there's a lot of good choices today, but in a lot of cases, some of the older choices are still really good too. All right, well, that's going to do it for today. We appreciate you as always. We're going to be back very soon with another video, so until that time, everybody be safe and have a great day. Thank you.